Hello and welcome to what some might describe as another download of drivel. We are the Tyre Kickers and we trawl the internet to find and talk about classic cars. My name is Max.
Hello there, and I'm Matt. This episode we talk retro-modding. Is it worth ripping up the past to create the classic of your dreams? Is modding historic heresy, or can you achieve perfection with the right selection?
Also, inferior interiors. The outside might have nice curves, but what makes your heart sink when you open the driver's door? From dodgy dashes to terrible trim, we name and shame the classics with insides that just look tragic.
And we also take a look at the most mundane classic cars. The cars that even now are just dull as ditch water. Does a classic have to be pretty though? Or does it just have to be memorable?
So inflate those tyres, rev away the blue smoke, and park it over the oil patch. And welcome to episode 8 of the Tyre Kickers.
So here we are then, episode 8. We're still alive and we're still tyre kicking. Thank you again for listening to our nonsense on a regular basis, commenting and also spreading the word about the podcast. We're having fun doing this. And it's also great to know that you're enjoying it as well. Well, at least some of it. And cheers for getting in touch.
Now, remember last episode we talked about Allegros. I heard from listener Mike, who said he was sitting in his friend's Allegro when he was in his 20s, eating lunch when a girl walked by and he said hi. They chatted. Not about the Allegro, I don't think, and then eventually married. What a good story that is. So see, Allegros weren't always as bad as you made out.
I think the Allegro is playing a sort of side part in that story. The question that comes to my mind as you were reading that out was what happens if they get divorced, though? Because normally stuff is 50-50, isn't it? But I think I would be saying, do you know what? Keep the car.
Who gets custody of the Allegro? Not me, you have it. Or custody of the Cortex steering wheel.
Talking of Cortex steering wheels and BL stuff, we've been ticked off, Max, by our regular listener, Keith D'Souza. He's told us off for having what he calls is a repeated dig at British Leyland, which I am guilty of. I hold my hands up. But I think, sorry, Keith, we'll try not to. But there's just so much material. It's hard not to. You're a big BL fan.
It's BL. I love BL, but you're right. There's so many things to pick apart. And I would happily buy every piece of BL going. And then just look at it and think, well, why did they do that? What was wrong there? You can't not, especially if you love BL, actually take it apart and say they did so many bad things.
It took itself apart most of the time, didn't it? You didn't need a screwdriver. It just shook apart over the years. Fell apart.
Now, has anybody read Classic Car Weekly this week? Apparently there's a photo of a lovely 1968 Sunbeam Alpine at Brooklands. The only thing that ruins it is the bloke that's standing in front of it. Any ideas?
You get some right old nerds, don't you, turning up at these things. Yes, that was Drive It Day, and I got papped by Classic Car Weekly with my Sunbeam Alpine.
Thank love you for it.
Papping me and put it. I don't like the attention. They put me amongst fellow nerds. Actually, it was a really good spread. If you go back to the Drive It Day edition, post Drive It Day, there's a really good spread in Classic Car Weekly. That was at Brooklands. There was loads of meets going on. I went to a breakfast one beforehand, and I thought I'd done well because I'd done about an hour and a half of driving. I went to the Brooklands one, and a guy rocks up in his Mercedes 108 saloon. He'd driven all the way from Plymouth. He got out, totally unflustered. I mean, I'd just driven my convertible in the 20 minutes up the road, and I was freezing, frostbite. I'd have my fillings had shaken out by all the potholes and the sort of terrible scuttle shake. He gets out of his Mercedes, really relaxed. He's doing a 300-mile round trip to go to Brooklands, and I thought, I want one now. There's another reason I want one. I just need to get a better garage. You did some Drive It Day stuff, didn't you? There was quite a lot of cars about.
Yeah, I put some stuff on Instagram. I went to the Motor Hub in Bybury, which is kind of my local meet, and it's only about 10 minutes away. And there was some beautiful stuff. There was a really nice XK140 with a 1968 Goodwood sticker in the window, so it's so original. You could actually smell it from a distance, from about 10 yards away. The smell of oil, the smell of leather, absolutely lovely. A Rover SD1, one you don't see that often, the 2600, which I think the engine was developed by Triumph for that one. I don't think BL used it anywhere else. That's quite a rare car. Lots of Lancia Monte Carlos. Remember them? I mean, such a nice looking car. Again, attacked by the rust, but I think there was about 6 or 7 of them. That was really good to see. And what else? There was a couple of other 911s, a couple of other 912s. And like your man who came from Plymouth, I met a 68 911 owner who was taking his to Stuttgart. That is very impressive. But he has bought himself a very, very good pair of earplugs because he's going to need it on the autobahns going flat out in one of those. Now, I'm taking my 912 off to the trimmers this week to get the interior sorted finally and having some soundproofing put in, which is going to be a great relief because the engine is really noisy on that. But the problem is, when you drown out the noise of the engine, what are you going to hear? The rattles. And I'll have to sort all those things.
At least the day was sunny, which was good. It was flipping freezing though, and I tell you, I don't like driving my convertible car with the roof up, so I do put the roof down and I suffer. But even looking out the window now as we're recording this, the weather's just rubbish at the moment, isn't it? It's taken so long to get going. I've got a classic car meet going with a friend here locally, which we started up for the summer. We had our first one since the last episode. While the sun was out, it was really, really cold. And I just thought, well, this time of year, it should be about right. But people turned out, we got the meet going, and then within an hour, everybody was shivering and went home. It just needs to improve. I'm sure it's normally warmer than this now, isn't it?
It'd be nice to think so. So when you get the roof down, do you get that kind of blood pressure, red-faced look?
The blower on my car doesn't work, apparently. I'm not sure that when I put the dashboard in, I put the heater controls up the right way. So I'm not quite sure whether cold's hot and hot's cold. It only seems to get hot in the car when it's summer. That's when you don't want it to be hot. So I just have to man up and put a scarf on and, just zip the coat right up and just do it. But I did go along the motorway in the cold. I don't mind if it's sunny, but if it's too cold, then forget it. But you got to do these things, haven't you?
I'm so soft these days. I do about a mile in my car and then think, where's my heated steering wheel? Where's my heated seats?
Well, it's been great to see all your stuff that you've commented on our Instagram page about your Drive It Day stuff, and it's good seeing all the Drive It Day stuff on there. Keep those pictures coming, comment on our stuff, share some stuff with us. We love seeing your cars, and so does everybody else. So send them as a private message or just comment on our posts. You can find us on Facebook as The Tyre Kickers, 3 separate words, and you can also find us on Instagram at The Tyre Kickers UK.
So we talked about classic car prices last time, and I'm sure it's not just me, but I'm noticing classic car prices are still falling. Now, this isn't scientific, it's anecdotal, and I'd be interested to hear what our listener thinks, but I do keep seeing prices being cut.
Well, it's no wonder, is it? Nobody's got any cash. You've got gas bills shooting up, lecky bills going up, mortgage going up, food prices, moan. The moaning's mainly just you, but other people haven't got any money. Politicians, the fun police, they've all made sure there's not enough cash left in our bank accounts to waste on cars that then waste even more cash. So you'd need a bit of cash either way. But you like watching prices, don't you, Max? You're kind of like a supermarket bargain hunter. Anybody, if you hang around Max's local Waitrose, he's normally there about 5 o'clock in the evening looking for the yellow stickers, but he's doing the same in a classified. So what have you seen?
Well, let's have a look at this one. This is a Mercedes 1967 250 SL Pagoda. Now, we've talked about this car before, but interestingly, I've been watching it for the last couple of weeks. It was at 99,000, it came down to 89,000, and now it's gone up to 94,950. It's one of those things that the price is all over the place because I'm guessing it's not attracting that many people looking at it. So 94,950 for a blue Pagoda 250 SL, not bad, still quite expensive. What do you think?
Do you think it's gone up, another $5,000, $6,000 because of the Easter effect that actually then didn't come? Do you remember? Because Easter was just a bit too early and then it's just been rubbish ever since.
I think it's one of those things that the people who are selling it, the dealers, don't have any confidence in their prices because they're not getting many people looking at it. People aren't coming to see it. So they're just changing prices on their websites to try and attract a bit of attention. And that's a sign of the market that nothing really is going on. And I sent this to you this week, actually, this other one, this Jaguar XK120 drop head coupe, 1953. It's absolutely gorgeous. Okay, it's got a bit of engine work. It's had some work in the past. It's not beautifully original, but it's £64,000. Look at that.
It is a beauty. That's the sort of thing you'd see in Bonham's catalogue, isn't it? With a massive phone number on it.
Yeah, so it's one of 294 home market right-hand drive drop head coupes. First registered in November 53, XK120. It's got dark paint on it, black paint on it. It's got the red leather interior. It looks gorgeous. 64,500. I mean, again, 2-3 years ago, that would have been 120, 130,000 pounds. So I do really see these prices coming down, and it is a kind of bargain hunting time.
Do any more pictures on that? I'm just trying to scroll. Oh yeah, further down. So what's wrong with this one then? I mean, what if you're going to pick holes in it? What's wrong with it?
I mean, it's got a couple of dents. It's not perfect, is it? But I think for me, that adds to its originality. So I don't see any problems with this. I think people who collect XK120s would want a perfect one. And this has had, if you look down the pictures, it's had a fair bit of bodywork done to it. But actually, it's all right. It's had a new clutch, had a body off restoration in the 2000s. It's had £10,000 spent in it in 2016, engine mounts, throttle linkage, full service. I think that's a great value car. They're not the best driving cars, XK120s, because it's a bit cramped and that steering wheel is just pointed at your chest, waiting for it to go wrong. But it's just the most gorgeous car probably you could get for that kind of money.
So what do you think is going on with the market, and what's your feeling? It's just there's not enough people swimming around, or they are swimming around, they're not biting. What's going on?
I think it's two things. I think the finance now is expensive. People who were buying the top-end classic cars on finance aren't doing it as much because the finance is more expensive. And I think it's like we said at the beginning, everything else is so expensive. You're thinking, I don't really want to spend the money on a classic car now. And I think some of the dealers are basically fishing around with their prices just to try and create some interest in things, because I'm not seeing that much footfall. And the fact that dealers are changing prices all the time suggests they haven't got the confidence in what they've got. They're trying to attract some attention, attract some buyers to have a look at their cars.
I think the one to look at the moment is auctions, because it is a tough time for dealers. So they're going to hedge their bets a little bit in terms of the stock they're taking on. People are holding on to their cars if they're not going to achieve very much in terms of a private sales. And obviously then people are reticent about spending money because they haven't got it, or as you say, borrowing money. They're sort of hesitant about that. So maybe an auction, stuff that does need to sell, keep an eye on the auctions the next few months. I think it's going to be some interesting times. There's some good ones coming up, and we'll report back on those as well. So do you see it changing, just briefly, Max, in the next sort of couple of weeks, couple of months?
I think it's going to be like this for probably 6 months. There's normally an uplift in the spring market, and I'm not really seeing that because I think, again, the interest rates. So is that going to be delayed all through the summer? And in that case, if you're not getting the sales in the summer, it's going to be a bit of a bloodbath in the autumn and the winter when it's really difficult to sell classic cars. So it's going to be an interesting 2-3 months. I think you're right. The auctions in the spring are going to be a fascinating watch, because if the prices are still falling in the spring, then traditionally, by the time you get to the summer, this kind of buying season's over, particularly for convertibles. And then the autumn and the winter, that's when I think the prices will be at their lowest. Now, let's face it, every classic car is a compromise, isn't it? They're never 100% of what you would have done. Maybe the engine is a bit underpowered, the trim might be a bit of poor quality, the design isn't quite right on point. But that's how it came out for the factories, so you've got to live with it, right?
Or maybe you haven't. Maybe you mod it. Maybe you retro-mod it. You keep the same DNA, you just beef it up a bit. So instead of, say, a 4-pot engine, you wedge in a V8. Or if you don't want rumble, just reliability, yes please, a newer lump. Something that starts without you swearing at it and doesn't leave a trail of oil all over your driveway and garage. The other thing you can also do is backdate a newer classic and make it look older, give it a bit more of a wow. Now, we've got some examples to talk through, but Max, you're not really sold on the retro-modding thing, are you?
No, not really. I've seen lots of really nice 911s, the 964s and the G-Body 3.2 Carreras and the 3 litres, kind of been chopped up over the last decade to turn them into sort of a pastiche of a 60s 911. And I'm not really a fan of that. I quite like the originality of it. I am a bit of the police when it comes to the originality, because a car is only original once. And also with 911s, you've got lots of choices. I'm not sure why I'd want to backdate an 80s one to a 60s one. Because if you're going to buy a 60s Porsche, like I have, drive around in a 60s Porsche and accept the compromises. And then if you want an 80s one, you buy an 80s one. I don't really get it. You don't retro-mod artwork or albums. So why do you do cars?
Yeah, but I think the thing to say with this is that you're not trying to pass something off as something else. It's not making a sort of kit car to look like to be that thing. To me, if it's done well, resto-modding is improving a car and making it unique while being sympathetic to its DNA. So I think that's okay. Put my cards on the table here. I'm very divided. I'd like a reliable engine in it. I'd like a sort of modern engine. You can put an MR2 in the Sunbeam Alpine I've got, I believe, and that would be but it would be heresy. Reliable. But it would be heresy, though. That's the other thing. It would be boring, but you turn the key in, it would go and it wouldn't overheat or no.
But then buy an MX-5. I don't get that. But just buy an MX-5.
Well, I don't want an MX-5. I want a car that looks beautiful. I just maybe don't want the mechanical problems that you get with running a classic car. Look, I mean, most of my time with my classic car is spent sorting out mechanicals. whether it's engine or suspension. There's always something to fix and something to sort out. So if you could make that easier, that's an argument. If you could improve it, if I could get rid of my 4-pot engine and put something in a bit nicer, like a V8 or something. Talking of which, Sunbeam V8. Let me show you this. This is a guy called Steve Wood that's done this. I think he's done a great job on it. And he spent a good few years and a lot of blood, sweat and tears on this. I've seen this in the flesh and it's great. Have a look at this on your screen. So it's a Sunbeam Alpine, but he's taken out the original Roots engine, which was a 4-pot thing that was in everything from the Hillman Minks and Scepters and all that sort of stuff. And he's given it a more of a Sunbeam Tiger feel. Now, Sunbeam Tiger, you'll know, is the V8 one, which they go for like 60, 70 grand. What he's done, though, he's given it much more of that kind of Cobra feel. He's put a new small block V8 in there, and he's not stopped there. He's kind of just given it a bit more aggression. And I think it's got a racy stance now and a feel to it. But I just think it's the right balance between aggression and style. What do you think?
I don't mind that, to be honest, but he's made it period sensitive, isn't it? It's a 65 Sunbeam, and he wants to keep it like a 65 Sunbeam. So I really don't mind that at all. And actually, it would be a really good, fun car to drive, isn't it? That's okay, but he's not trying to make it something it's not.
Let's move on to another one. This is going to be a little bit, maybe a bit more Marmite for you. 1975 BMW 1602 Resto Mod. It's an EV Resto Mod, though.
Right.
This one belongs to Jerry, who's a friend of mine. He lives in London, and he's come up with what he thinks is the perfect classic car for living in London. So it's based on a 75 1602. He had electric classic cars in Wales do a ground-up resto, followed by an EV conversion. Now, a lot of people go, ooh, and I've seen people in the flesh go, ooh. I've been in this car, and it's fun, and it's quick, and it's fast, and it looks amazing. It does get a reaction when he brings it to meets, but people do want to know about it and they do want to see it. What do you think of that? I mean, it looks beautiful. There's no doubt about that. It's got beautiful red interior and stuff. What do you think about the idea of an EV classic BMW?
It looks great. And if that's what he wants to do, that's what he can do because it's his own car and his own money. My problem is that we're going to be forced to put probably electric power plants in our classic cars in 10, 15 years time, whatever. So you're kind of ruining that BMW 1602 before because there's no way of turning that back, is there? You couldn't actually put the petrol engine back into it because it would just be way too much money and hassle. I get it, I get it for driving around London. He'll probably have to do it in a few years' time anyway. So, yeah, but it just seems like you're missing the experience because I think with classic cars, the engine, the buzz, the feel of them, going through the gearbox is what it's about. Now, as a point on this, because I've seen with quite a few EV conversions that have left the gearbox in, how do you cool the gearbox? Because normally that oil to cool the gearbox will be running from the engine. So how do you get hot oil into the gearbox? I mean, how does that work?
Pass. But I'll ask him and I'll let you know.
Because lots of gearboxes can just get chewed up without any oil or with cold oil in them. So I don't know how that works. But yeah, I mean, each to his own. It's not particularly my bag. All power to his elbow for doing it, but it's not something that I would choose to do unless I'm forced to.
Yeah, I really like the car. I think he's done a great job on it. The electric thing doesn't do it for me, but it does make it interesting, and it's been done tastefully, and that's coming back to that sort of same point again. Let's put you on to another example, and I think this is one where you're going to have a much stronger opinion. This was at Brooklands. It's an 88 Porsche 911 I saw there. Really nice chap that I got chatting to. I can't remember your name. Sorry if you're listening. I'm a fan of your car. Whatever Max is about to say, it's not my opinion.
Well, if we don't,
it was a whale tail.
If we don't name him, we can't.
Well, that's true,
can we? So fantastic. Let's call him Dave.
But it's Dave. Dave with this 911. What he's done, Max, is he's got an 88 whale tail, and he's turned back the clock on it and turned it into a 1972 era 911. So he's swapped panels. He's tried to make it look and feel right. The interior obviously is an 80s interior, but he's had it retrimmed by an ex-Aston Martin trimmer who he got him to trim everything he could. Anything plastic, black and plastic, he's trimmed in tan leather. It looks the biz. What do you think of this?
This is one of the cars I've got a slight problem with because I really like the original car that he made this on. You said it's a 1988. It's a G-body 3.2 Carrera. I love those. I love the whale tail look.
No, I didn't say that. I said whale tail. You've done all the specky, nerdy stuff on top of that.
Yeah, okay. If you're saying if it's a 1988, it's a 3.2 Carrera. So I really like those. I think it's a real shame that car has now gone. He's put basically the long hood bonnet on it, so it makes it a pre-72 look car. But then the interior gives it away because it's the 1988 interior. I'm not a huge fan of that. Again, I don't want to be rude about somebody else's car, but Dave, you're all wrong there, because I think you've kind of got a pastiche. You've got a bit of a car in drag, because it's not one thing or a t'other. Now, obviously, you can drive it, you can enjoy it, you get to enjoy it.
Here's something though he can do in this car that you can't necessarily do in your 60s car, which is take it on long journeys and not worry about it. Does that not give it a bit more of a interesting spin?
Yes, I see what you're getting at, but I kind of think if you're driving something from the past, you have to accept the compromises from the past, because that's part of the experience, isn't it? If you wanted to drive, again, back to your MX-5 example, if you wanted to get somewhere with a heated seat and a DAB radio, you get your MX-5. If you don't want to do that and you want to feel the experience, then you get your older car. Now, he's kind of experiencing an 88 Carrera with a 60s look, and he's done a nice job of it, but it's not something that I would do. Take a piece of art, which is a 911 to me, and then mash it around.
I think you're right, actually. And again, it's very unusual that I agree with you, but my car's just sprung an oil leak again. So it's like, oh, for God's sake, here we go again. I've already been down this road and sort of thrown a load of money at it a couple of years ago to get sorted. And it's the same thing, I think. So, you sort of think, oh, if only the bloody engine was just behaved itself. But by and large, it does. But the thing that makes that interesting is it does need a couple of goes to get it going. You do need to pull the choke out. You do need to sit with your foot on the throttle a bit to warm it up. And then when it warms up, you get the reward. You get that raspiness. You do have to drive the car. You have to concentrate when you're doing it. And that's what makes it different.
I think the point to all of this for me is that it's a contradiction, isn't it? Because when you drive a classic car, you want to feel it as an experience. When you drive a modern car, an EV, you've got a Tesla, I've got a Tesla, it's a completely joyless experience. It's about as good as loading the dishwasher. So that's why I look forward to going back to a 60s car that's a bit unreliable. It smells, it makes noises, it judders, it creaks, it rattles. And so I don't want to sort of tune those experiences out just for a bit of added reliability. I'll take the risk, and I have broken down quite a few times, as you have. I'll take the risk in order to get the experience. And for me, that's where resto-modding doesn't really work out, because you're tuning out the genuine classic car experience. So
we've been wittering on about resto mods. What do you think about it? Is there a tasteful way to modify and improve a car for yourself that sort of gives a nod to its heritage? Or do you think it's just best avoided? Let us know on our socials. We're on Instagram at The Tyre Kickers UK, and also on Facebook, 3 separate words, The Tyre Kickers. So, as we've been talking about, classic cars are often a piece of art, things of beauty that can lift someone's day as they fly past at speed. Well, most of them, that is. But some people, Max, just love their mundane motors.
See, I always find myself drawn to the crap corner at car shows, the stuff that parking stewards direct to the back of the field. There's a big market for the boring cars of our past.
Yeah, and this sort of stuff is the meat and drink of the Festival of the Unexceptional that happens every year. This year, it's July 27th at Grimsthorpe Castle in Lincolnshire. Max, even the venue sounds grim.
Yeah, I've never been to that, but I think we should go. I think let's pick the most mundane motor that we could take to that. Now, my first entrant is something that was inflicted on my sister just after she passed her driving test. It's the very definition of mundane. It's a Volvo 340. Look at this, a 1988 Volvo 340 4-door. Now, I remember borrowing one of these, and the thing would just understeer. It was horrid and so boring a car. It looks like a hippo.
Yeah, these were the sort of favoured cars of like librarians and architects and teachers. They weren't your average car. Most people had the sort of BLs and the British cars of the 70s, your Vauxhalls and stuff. The Volvo was a little bit, I think it was more expensive, wasn't it, at the time? But it was very forgettable, this, wasn't it?
Awful. I think my mum and dad didn't really like my sister that much because this is an automatic and she had an automatic. It was awful. I remember hating it from the moment I got in it. And even just the first 3 or 4 miles of a drive, you could tell it was just a horror. Absolutely vile.
It didn't have the cachet of the larger Volvos because the estates had a little bit of a cachet. I think they were more expensive. They weren't your average car. You were doing well if you could afford a Volvo estate. But these were sort of, I don't know, they were the librarian equivalent, weren't they? Were just a bit beige.
Yeah, because the design language of the Volvos in the 80s was really quite good. Volvo estates were quite stylish in their boxy way. This was just horrid. But actually, here's another one. I'm going to actually lower the bar now and bring you along to a 1983 Talbot Horizon. Now, this was an absolute horror. I had a mate of mine who had one of these as his first car. His dad had about 4 or 5 in various states of disrepair on his drive. And between the 4 or 5, they kind of made a Frankenstein Talbot Horizon. Nothing really worked, and the heater didn't work, the wipers didn't work, everything was wrong. It's just such a horrid car.
Yeah, again, and it looks very slabby and similar to the Volvo. You hadn't shown me these until we started talking. I wanted the reveal of them, really. And
the true
I've got to
horror.
say, we're already into a couple of cars that are very, very familiar to me, but I'd just completely forgotten about because they're so boring.
Well, I've had to go to Lisbon in Portugal to find a Talbot Horizon for sale, because I'm guessing they've all just been crushed because they were so awful, rusted, and just nobody wanted them. They were horrendous cars to drive. And I think this was more than mundane. This was just actually evil. I think the Talbot Horizon was a terrible car. They did use them for rallying a bit, I think, but oh God, this is just a horror. And the next one is actually, this is my bête noire of cars. I hate this with a passion. And this is, again, more than mundane. It's a 1983 Triumph Acclaim HL. This is a project for sale. If anybody out there wants to absolutely take on a lifetime's work.
You resto mod that into a barbecue. That's what you could
anything.
Do.
Just turn it into a fridge. I mean, this Triumph Acclaim, they had that kind of slight Japanese rubberiness combined with a kind of British crapness. And this just mixes the worst of 2 car cultures. Individually, Japanese cars, British cars could be great. Put them together, this Acclaim was awful. What do you think of this?
No, it was a shocker. But again, a very, very familiar sight during the 80s, but we've all forgotten about it. All these cars they were just unacceptable. Unacceptable or unexceptional, one of the two. They were just unexceptional. So they just got forgotten. I think if you fast forward to the 90s, we're talking, like Cavaliers, Astras, those sort of cars, Escorts of the 90s, they all got crushed as well. In fact, one of our listeners, Casting Classics, I've mentioned this in a previous episode, they get approached by a lot of people trying to make, production companies trying to make 90s cop shows, because they're quite popular at the moment, crime shows. And they can't get any 90s cars, like mundane cars, because they all got crushed.
I do think it's interesting because some of the 90s mundane cars were okay. I mean, the Cavaliers used to handle okay. The Astras used to handle really nicely. It's just the 80s mundane motors were just genuinely bad cars. Not only were they boring, they were bad and boring, which is a double crime in my book. And those 3, the Volvo 340, the Horizon and the Acclaim, mundane and vicious because they were just such horrible drives. 90s mundane motors, slightly better. I used to have a Cavalier in the 90s, and actually it used to fly along like everybody else. It was flat out on the motorways at 1.6. Used to handle quite nicely. So those mundane motors, nice. These mundane motors on our screen, evil. And also, I do think about these mundane cars. It's really interesting to see them, but who is actually buying them? Because you get that kind of mundane experience, and maybe people would laugh at you. It's nice for me to see somebody has preserved a Metro, but I wouldn't do it myself. What about you? I'm
sort of slightly concerned how emotive you're getting about a Talbot Horizon. I mean, I just think it's a bit dull. It sounds like this car has kidnapped you and tortured you for some period of time.
It did. My mate Steve drove me down the M1 and it was -10 and it had no heating, and I had to wipe the inside of the screen. I was in the passenger seat, wipe the inside of the screen with my sleeve just so we could see out of it. And it was just a horror. The noises, the gearbox, it was just terrible. I don't know why they even made these cars, to be honest. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the Talbot Horizon, as you might guess, and I certainly won't be buying one to take it to a car show.
I'm going to buy you one as a birthday present, and it's a surprise. I'm going to put a big bow on it, park it on your drive.
Stick a bow on it, that'll make it better.
just watch your face. How much are they? How much is this one going for?
I'm going to make you drive it afterwards as a punishment. You've got to drive it back from Lisbon. That's your punishment.
If it makes it, I would love to see your face as you open the door. Surprise!
It's the Horizon.
Yeah, I think they are mundane. I think though, if you're being inclusive to everybody in classic car world, if this is what you can afford to get you into the world of classics, then there is an argument that, why knock it? But I've got to say, £1,500, you could be getting yourself a Spitfire or something and having a bit more fun. Trying for a Talbot Horizon or a Triumph Acclaim. How much do they want for that Acclaim? $1,250?
Whatever it is, too much. $1,250. Yeah, and it's a project. I mean, $1,250
spares or repairs or crush.
Just cry. Do you know, let's pay £1,250 and then blow it up. That'd be a nice thing to do.
Yeah, unfortunately, what mundane motors do you think are really should be forgotten about? Again, get involved in our socials and let us know. I mean, the mundane should be celebrated. They do at this festival of the unexceptional. It's not for your eye, but each to their own, I suppose. Get another plug for that festival if you want to look it up. July 27th at Grimsthorpe Castle in Lincolnshire. If you want to see more mundane motors, that's the place to go.
So on a similar vein to mundane motors, here's another question. Which cars are a disappointment behind the wheel? What interior bursts your bubble when you sit in the driving seat?
Yeah, this is a big one for me. We're talking here about those cars that look great from the outside, perhaps, but when you get in, you go, ugh. For me, the interior is probably one of the most important things in a car. It's what you see most of the time. It's what you interact with. So in my eyes, an inferior interior is a bit of a no-no for me. Case in point, Max, I love a Stag. We both like Stags. I've always hankered after a Stag. I've come close to buying a Stag a couple of times, but more times than I can remember when I've gone in and sat in a Stag, I've gone, ugh. It's that cheap dash. It's the nasty seats. Everything just feels very, very low rent. I've sat in Stags that have been restored and had a lot of money spent on the interiors, and they were nice. But the out the factory stuff, it just looks cheap and nasty. And I just think that puts me off every single time. Then I lift the bonnet and that really puts me off because Stags, they are not for the faint-hearted. But where are you on interiors? Has it got to be on point an interior for you or not?
Well, I don't mind the Stag. I'm going to show you some interiors which are genuinely horrible. Let's have a look at this. It's a 1982 Morris Ital Estate. Now, I always remember these because they had the radio facing the passenger. So the interior is so bad, they couldn't actually get the radio to face the driver. So if you are driving and you want to tune into a radio station, which in the old days you had to turn a dial, then that was virtually impossible to see it at the same time because it was pointing in the wrong direction. Look at that.
God, I'm looking at it now. This is upsetting my OCD straight away. One, the steering wheel looks upside down. As you say, that the dashboard seems to sort of have been designed for a left-hand drive car, and then they've gone, oh, hold on a minute, we're in Britain. Let's put the steering wheel on the right side. It just looks lopsided, doesn't it? Even the gear stick looks like it wants to get the passenger involved and not talk to the driver. The whole dashboard is so ashamed of what it looks like. It's facing away. It doesn't even want to stare you in the eyes.
Yeah, the Ital was terrible because it came after the Marina, and so it took the Marina's terrible interior and then lowered the bar a bit more. I mean, the steering wheel isn't even in the centre of the dashboard.
Terrible.
It's weird. It's kind of offset to the left.
Who designed that and said, oh, I know, why don't we angle the radio and the heater controls away from the driver so they'll have to peer around the corner to operate them?
If you're ever broken down in an Ital, which would be probably every day, look where the hazard warning switch is. It's about as far from the driver as you can humanly get. Just bizarre. The ergonomics on that car are terrible. I think that, for me, is probably the worst interior of any car.
At least, though, the bonus with that, if you did break down, you get out of it. You wouldn't have to look at that interior. Let's have a look, see what else we've got here. A car that I learnt to drive in. So I'm familiar with this interior. A Citroen BX. In fact, the one that we're looking at is a red BX. It's exactly the same as that I learned to drive in. Now, these had two generations of interiors. The first was very kooky. It was a bit like a sort of CX. It had the indicators not on stalks, but on individual pods. I wonder if this is the one you're showing me. They were the kind of rocker
switches, weren't they?
Yes.
Just at the top
this
of the
is what we're
dash,
looking at.
In theory, reach them with your fingers.
That's right. So they didn't self-cancel either. So you had to learn. Now, if you're learning to drive, that's a bit more complicated than the rest of the cars. And the second generation, they went to stalks and it got a bit easier. But yeah, these were really kooky and weird. And all those two pods on either side of the dash had all sorts of lots of random stuff, which didn't fall very naturally to your fingers. And you had to sort of work out what they were. Once you worked out what everything was, it was okay. I think you could go back further in Citroens. What is it about the BX that doesn't do it for you?
I remember the switches, the build quality of the switches. It was that really hard plastic. Now, you know when you play Connect 4 and you drop one of those counters into the Connect 4 thing? That's exactly what it sounded like operating a switch on a BX. It was so cheap and so nasty.
it's very much like the Citroen GSA, and we've had a couple of suggestions from listeners. Henry, who listens to the podcast, said in terms of inferior interiors, have a look at the Citroen GSA, because he says space age dash and the rest was pretty horrible. That interior was pretty grotty. The BX was actually all right. The seats were okay in the BX, but if you go back to a Citroen GSA, it is pretty worse. In fact, we've got one here. Have a look at this Citroen GSA, because
Wow.
Quite nasty seats.
They say on modern cars with the touchscreens, how long it takes you to change from Radio 1 to Radio 2. Well, have a look at this. I mean, how do you turn the headlights on that? It's got two individual pods either side of the central dashboard. The dashboard has got a kind of Star Trek style picture of where things go wrong with warning lights pointing to them. And the low fuel warning light points to the wheel for some reason. And it's got one of those this is awful, a strip speedo. And two pods with some various switches on it. But how would you turn on the wipers? Oh, okay, right, top left.
It does give you a bit of a migraine just looking at that. That isn't the problem, though, and I think Henry's point is right. It's sort of a real space-age dash, but the rest of the car was pretty rubbish. We had vinyl seats in our Citroen GS when I was a kid. But you could pay more if you didn't want vinyl seats. But then you got the velour, which I think was actually worse. Velour in cars just doesn't really rub with me. So that's a bit odd. But we've had another one from a listener, Lee, suggested Datsun 120Y. What do you reckon of that? Let's get that up.
Yeah, we've just got a picture of that. And that is just a festival of black plastic, isn't it? Black, and some really cheap plastics. I mean, interestingly, the 120Y was such a rust bucket, I'm not sure you'd actually get a chance to see the interior because the exterior would have rusted by then. But that's horrible. I mean, Datsun design in the 70s wasn't awful, but that is a pretty bad example of where it went wrong. The steering wheel, these were the early days of safety. So I think if you hit that steering wheel with your head, you might survive, you might not, but I'm not sure you'd survive sitting behind looking at that dashboard all day. It's horrible.
If you whacked your face into that Citroen GSA one, though, you come up with like a imprint, wouldn't you? It'd be like a diagram printed on your face of all the different stuff. One more just to squeeze in the time we've got left from another listener, Chris H. And this is a Fiat X19. A similar sort of idea here. Too much going on. What do you think?
A Fiat in the 1980s was a pretty sad place to sit in. Terrible switches. I remember Fiat when they took over Ferrari. You went from that really nice interior in the Ferrari 308 to that horrible plasticky buttons of the Ferrari 328. And it's the same buttons in the Fiat X19. It's just slab-sided, cheap buttons with cheap hard plastic and crappy velour. That's vile.
Ugh. Interiors, I think for me, it's quite an important thing. In fact, when I wanted to get back into classic cars after a break, one of the things I missed was the interior. I missed the dials, the chrome dials, the sort of just the difference in terms of the way the interior looked. So that's why I went for a 60s car and I wanted those Jaeger dials. And one of the first things I did when I got my classic car was sort the interior out, because I just think for me, it's the pleasure of seeing nice, clean, well-designed, shiny stuff that looks good in the sunshine. I think that's part of the pleasure of the classic car thing for me. So yeah, these sort of plasticky and bad interiors of the 70s are just don't do it for me whatsoever. But I think it's going to be one that we return to, Max.
So that's all for episode 8. Now please do get in touch if you've noticed prices falling, or any bargain classics, or if you've got a mundane motor we've insulted, or a Porsche you'd might like to keep original.
We are on Instagram at The Tyre Kickers UK. We're also on Facebook as well. Just search for The Tyre Kickers. It's 3 separate words. Also, details on there of how you can get one of our Tyre Kickers car stickers by just sending us your details. Have a look. It's all the details there on our socials.
Now, in the next episode, what classic gives the best driving experience? Let's look at the cars that go and handle like your pants are on fire.
And if you've enjoyed this episode, please go and tell your 9 million closest friends that we're here talking rubbish on a regular basis. So please pass us on, and we'll see you next time. This episode, we talk retro-modding. Is it worth ripping up the past to create the classics of... Bollocks, it's going well then. Okay.